What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to be going over the top 10 Silver Age Amazing Spider-Man keys, and if any of them look good to be purchasing right now, or if you want to avoid them. Stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So, this video is going to be like the one I did recently with the top 10 Silver Age Grails. I'm going to be doing half the video here and half the video over on the Fanalytics YouTube channel. So, if you want to see everything, you got to make sure you go check out the video on the Fanalytics page as well, and I am going to be doing a giveaway for this video as well. I've already mailed out the giveaway from the last one, so congratulations to the winner of that book. I've got a new giveaway for this pair of videos, and this is going to be this copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 46. So in honor of going through the top 10 Silver Age Amazing Spider-Man keys, I'm going to be giving away a Silver Age Amazing Spider-Man key. So first appearance of the Shocker. So remember, you got to go over to the Fanalytics YouTube channel, follow the instructions there with this video if you want a chance to win this book. All right, so now let's get into what we're gonna be talking about in this video. And so, like I said, we're going over the top 10 Amazing Spider-Man keys from the Silver Age. I did not include Amazing Fantasy 15 or Amazing Spider-Man 1 because I already went over those in my Silver Age Grails video. So I picked the top 10 other than those two. Now, what I did is I looked at the most common grade again, and that's based on the CGC census, and I do that just because it gives me the most data. Then I looked at what the prices are right now and what I think the value of the book should be based on the historical returns that these books have normally given. And that's giving me an approximate estimate of if I think these books are reasonable to buy right now, if they're safe to buy, or if you should be avoiding them. They've got a lot of ways to drop still, or if maybe it's just a watch candidate. You know, you might want to buy them, but be a little cautious with them. So with all that, let's get into these books. All right, what is going on, everyone? So let's get into these books here. So the first one here is Amazing Spider-Man number 9, and you can see I've got a few different numbers on the screen. So on the top here, I have the CGC census data, and so I've got what the total number of books that are graded on the census right now, as well as the number of universal copies or blue label copies. And so if you're not familiar with that, those are the books that haven't been restored, haven't been signed, that kind of thing. Then I also have a grade. The grade is the most common grade for this book per the CGC census. I use the most common grade just because it means that I'm more likely to have sales data that I can use, because if there's more of them graded, they're more likely to have been, bought and sold over any period of time. Now on the bottom here, I have some pricing data. I have what I value the book at today based on current sales. Then I also have two annual return values, one from 2015 to 2020 and one from 2002 to 2012. Now, the reason I did this was that I was seeing some pretty outsized returns over the last 5 years, and it just made me a little bit concerned that those weren't sustainable. So I thought I would look at an earlier time period as well to see what those books were doing prior to that. And so that can give us a range of where these books might be going, because that's what we're doing here. We're just making our best educated guess at what the values of these books are and where they're going to go. And that's going to tell us if this book is maybe undervalued or overvalued right now. So with that, let's get into this book. So with Amazing Spider-Man number 9, this one is on here because it is the first appearance of Electro, one of the big Amazing Spider-Man villains, part of the Sinister Six. Most common grade is a 4.0 with 269 blue labels, universal copies on the census. Total census is 3,133 copies with 2,692 blue labels. Now, I have the current price for a 4.0 at $950. And you can see the pre-boom return. And so I use compound annual growth for these. The pre-boom return from 2015 to 2020 was 16%. Then when I looked at 2002 to 2012, the return was 5%, quite a bit lower. And so that is why I looked at both of these, because there's a pretty big range in what I saw and how these books really started spiking quite a bit from 2015 to 2020. So in around April of 2020, this book was selling for $575. So since then, if you apply the 16% return, this book would be going for about $900 today. If you apply the 5% return, it would be going for about $665 today. So we've got a pretty big range there, but if you would assume the upper end of that, it's still got about 5% to drop, pretty close to where it is right now. But at the lower end, it's got about 30% to drop. So depending on your risk tolerance, what you think this book might do long term, this one might be one that you want to be cautious with for right now. All right, now let's move on to number 9. We have Amazing Spider-Man number 15. Pretty relevant book right now because we've got a movie that's eventually going to be coming out focusing on Kraven, and initial news around it sounds like it might be a good movie. We'll see how it turns out. But first appearance of Kraven, and again, the most common grade was a 4.0 with 303 blue labels, 303 universal copies. Now, the total census for this book was 3,443 with 3,068 universal copies. Now, at a 4.0, current price of this book is about $875. Now, I have seen a lot of price compression with this book right now around these grades. So you're getting a lot of similar sales numbers. What I mean when I say that, you're getting similar sales numbers across multiple grades. This was the book that got me to start considering looking at what the prices were earlier in the 2000s versus now, because it had an 18% return from 2015 to 2020. And that just seemed very high compared to what I've seen with other Silver Age keys. And when I looked at its return from 2002 to 2012, it was a 9% return. So this book in 2020 was going for about $590. If we apply those returns at the 18% return rate, it would be a $970 book today. At the 9% return rate, it would be a $765 book. So you can see this one is actually maybe a little bit more appealing. At the 18% return, which I admit is very unlikely, it has an 11% upside. It means it's actually undervalued right now. But even at the 9%, it only has a 13% downside. That's not that bad, especially considering we've got a movie that's coming out. And this book, to me, just from what I've seen, just anecdotally, it does seem like this one has overcorrected. And this would back that up, showing that we have the potential that it's actually undervalued right now. So definitely a book that's pretty appealing to me right now. This book had a peak sale of $2,000. So it has come down by 56% since that peak sale in a 4.0. It's definitely a book that's corrected quite a bit and does look pretty appealing right now. All right, now let's move on to number 8. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 13, first appearance of Mysterio. Again, another one of the original Amazing Spider-Man villains, part of the Sinister Six. Most common grade, also a 4.0 with 287 blue labels. 3,442 total on the census with 2,892 universal copies. Now, the current price for a 4.0 is $950. And from 2015 to 2020, this book was returning about 17%. Again, if we go and look at 2002 to 2012, it was returning 5%. So another book where we're going to have a pretty big range here. We've got at that 17%, this book would be about an $800 book right now. The 5%, this would be a $580 book. So you look at these numbers, this one is definitely one that I would be avoiding right now. Even at the 17% return level, this book still has a downside of 16% or $150. At the 5% level, it is a downside of almost $400 or 39%. Definitely a book that I would be avoiding right now, even though it had a peak sale of $1,663, down 43% from there. But I think this is a book that could still continue to fall quite a bit. It's just a book that got really, really expensive when we had Mysterio come out in the new Spider-Man movies, and then it really got expensive during the comic boom, and it just has not corrected enough yet. A book that, at least to me right now, I would be avoiding. All right, now let's move on to number 7. Here we've got Amazing Spider-Man number 6, first appearance of the Lizard. Another one of the early ASM villains, actually one of my favorite books from when I was a kid. I had always wanted a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 6 as a kid because I had his second appearance that came out much later with Amazing Spider-Man number 44. Now, this character wasn't nearly as involved with Spider-Man early on, but I think one of the reasons why this character appealed to me is that he was definitely a relatively major player, played a big role in the cartoons that I watched when I was a kid. Now, the most common grade, again, is a 4.0. You'll see that is pretty common across most of these. A 4.0 is generally the most common grade, and there are 283 universal copies at that 4.0. Total on the census is 3,179 with 2,771 universal copies. Current price for a 4.0, $800. And another book that has a lot of compression on this book. Between the 3.0 and the 4.0, they are generally selling for about the same price. Now, prior to the comic boom, from 2015 to 2020, this book was just having a return of 10%, quite a bit lower than what we've seen with a lot of these other keys. This one just didn't seem to have the spikes that we were seeing with those other books. And then if we go back to 2002 to 2012, a return of 7%. So when we take what this book was going for in 2020, it was about a $600 book. At that 10% return, that would make it an $800 book today. At the 7% return, it would make it a $735 book. So from what we can see here, this book has pretty low risk right now. Definitely an appealing book to be purchasing right now, at least on the downside risk. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of downside risk to me on this book at these prices. At the 10% return, no downside risk, 0%. And at the 7% return, just 8% downside risk. So yeah, definitely a book that to me looks appealing right now. Had a peak sale of $1,775 in a 4.0. It has come down 55% since then, so it's had a pretty major correction. Definitely a book, like I said, that is appealing right now. All right, now let's move on to number 6. This is the last one of this video, and then you'll have to jump over to the Fanalytics channel to check out numbers 5 through 1, as well as looking at all of these results together. So, why is this book important? This is a multi-key. This is the first appearance of Gwen Stacy, who is obviously very popular today as Spider-Gwen, as well as Harry Osborn. Now, also, most common grade is a 4.0. I thought this one might be different because it's a little bit later, but still, most common grade was a 4.0 with 332 blue labels. This one has 3,705 copies on the census with 3,302 universals. Now, this book is quite a bit less expensive than the other ones that I've talked about. At a 4.0, just $325. From 2015 to 2020, had a return of 14%. From 2002 to 2012, had a return of 7%. So with that, it would put its estimated value at $280 today at that 14% return, or $230 at the 7% return. Both of those mean that there's a downside risk to this book, 14% downside to 29% downside. This one's tough because I do think that with Spider-Gwen, and this being the first time you ever have Gwen Stacy as a character, that maybe this one will start to return a higher percentage long term, but still it does have that downside risk to it. And so it's one that I would be pretty cautious about right now. I think it could correct further, and I would just wait and see what happens with this book. All right, so hope you enjoyed that first half of this video. If you'd like to see the second half, you've got to go over to the Fanalytics YouTube channel, watch that video, and if you want a chance to win this book, that's where you can do it. You got to follow the instructions over there. So if you'd like to see more content like this, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, the notification bell, all that kind of stuff. I've got more videos over here. If you'd like to watch some of my other videos, I've got the subscription button right here for subscribing to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.